Right, Penny.
Good morning, everybody. A big welcome, your third in succession. But it's so good that so many mayors of important cities in the world have given up their time to come and listen to what we have been doing about human trafficking, and with my colleague Graham about climate change, because the two academies work very closely together. So why human trafficking? And what I want to do is to tell a quick story in pictures about where it came from and where we hope to go to. The problem itself being one which, according to the ILO, involves at least 30 million people, but are useless in this respect. It's just like burglary in any country. If a thief is a good thief, he does not get caught and he does not get recorded. So every figure is necessarily an underestimate. Okay, so one morning, nearly 2 years ago now, I was peacefully having breakfast in Mexico, in San Cristobal de las Casas, and I had my iPad, and I opened my iPad, and there was a message saying, Papa Francisco has just appointed you as president of the Social Science Academy. So my immediate reflex was, what would you like us to do, Holy Father? What work would you like us to do? And this is the reply that came back immediately. Written on an envelope back, and the English translation is below the Spanish, and it tells us to direct our investigations towards the elimination of trafficking, and not to forget, this is very important, that one of the most horrendous aspects of human trafficking is trafficking persons, although it is one of the most difficult aspects to investigate. So we began where you would rather expect the Church to begin. I often say, though I'm not sure that theologically this is appropriate, that the Catholic Church is one of the oldest social movements in the world, and that we should continue to be a social movement. We should continue to support the poor, and we should try and mobilize and use all our resources to do so, to deal with social problems. Now, this is not a typical role for an academy, but we do not have, thank God, a typical pope. He wants us to be activists, and we are very glad to do so. So where did we start with this brief to examine human trafficking? We started with a meeting which eventually became the Santa Marta group that some of you will have heard of, a meeting of some religious leaders and police chiefs from different countries of the world. And this was very revealing indeed, because, well, just to highlight one aspect, this rather serious-looking gentleman at the bottom right is from Spain, and he showed us the most amazing thermal technology that can identify when a ship which is not registered to come into port is, and it can take thermal photographs to establish whether there are human bodies, forms, in which case it might be a case of trafficking, or boxes, in which it might be a case of drug trafficking, and the two can go on simultaneously. So this is very revealing, but it was about criminalizing and technologizing the tracking down of the traffickers, which is essential. But we wanted to move on from there, and talk not just about crime, but to talk about the human persons involved, the loss of human dignity that is entailed in being trafficked. So we had joint meeting with the Academy of Natural Sciences, and already we are in April 2014, and the meeting was trying to forge some of the links. We mustn't force them. It is not direct causality. But certainly as the climate changes, becomes more unpredictable, as things like acidification of the seas takes place, people who depend upon fishing for their livelihood lose their means of subsistence. Similarly, desertification, those who very poor, who are still living hunting and gathering, again, their means of subsistence are retreating. This means that necessarily, if they are to live, they have to move. They tend to move to the nearest settlement, and it cannot be taken for granted that it is easy for them to integrate there. Some of them end up living in cardboard boxes and plastic roofing. They find no jobs. They find no place for their families. There's the eternal problem of the very young and the very old. And this places these people who come into that category that Pope Francis calls treated as disposable people in a very dangerous position where their desperation can, there's no determinism, but can drive them to listen to the stories that the fraudulent traffickers will tell them can be their future if only they can find large sums of money, which is where bonding into slavery comes from. The sums are enormous. For Nigeria, for example, this is UNODC statistic, sometimes they're charged $30,000 to get from Nigeria to somewhere in Europe. Now, obviously, these marginal people who just lost their livelihoods cannot raise $30,000. And so they sign a bond that they will, just as in olden times, they will become slaves for a period. Sadly, that period never ends. They make calculations themselves, and then they're told, oh, but you have not included your food, your accommodation, your clothes, etc., etc. And so it extends, it extends, it extends. There is no manumission, as in traditional slavery, no period at which you become a free man or a free woman. And so that was the main thing we did during that meeting. As you all know very well, and some of you will have experienced it, the Pope makes a tremendous impact among young people. And his idea was to have a meeting in which young people would be informed about the cause and encouraged to take action. A young boy from my own parish in England took part in this, and he is now doing a small project in his college of the University of London about the supply chain of things like food, cleaning products, etc., that are used by the college. And one of our proposals, thanks to the work of this young student, is that we should have a kind of mark, we call it an icon mark, which shows that things that are traded have not been part of a supply chain that entails forced labor. So this was a very useful move forward. From the young, we went to a meeting in December with religious leaders. Now, the really crucial thing about human trafficking is that you can draw in supporters from everywhere. And just like every social encyclical since Vatican II, it is not addressed to faithful Catholics. It's not even a Catholic document as such. It's all people of goodwill. And all people of goodwill can be from all faiths or none. And the supporters of the abolition of, or the new abolitionism of slavery, indeed come from the world religions, you can see there, and all. Now, of course, since we are in the digital age, I'm a sociologist, and I know what quantities of books there are about digital society. One of the things we did was to start our own website, and I don't know if Gabriella is here, she's probably working. This has been a great success. Now, what are we trying to do? Certainly spread information. People one talks to, I know, total, but they say, I had no idea that this was going on. Not in my country, not in my region, not in my town. It is. And there is a lot of internal trafficking as well. And this is one of the things that the website informs people about. But we have a specific aim in this. And this became very clear again in April this year, when we held our plenary meeting. These are big 4-day meetings of the Academy, and we called it Issues Beyond Criminalization. Now, obviously, this is a crime. We would ask, it's a crime against humanity, which is a slight extension of the use of this term, but it is catching on. And criminalization has been the main thing that has preoccupied workers who are striving for new legislation. All the legislation is relatively new. It is all 21st century. There was nothing on trafficking as we mean it today, and modern slavery as we mean it today, before the UN started discussing this in 2000 and passed its protocol in 2003, which gained within 10 years 154 national signatories. But every signatory to the Palermo Protocol, as it's known, has to pass national legislation about its implementation. And that national legislation has almost exclusively focused upon criminalization, how to detect more traffickers, how to prosecute more traffickers, how to get more trafficked persons to come forward as witnesses. But still, the UNODC's 2014 report, we'll see that the numbers are pathetically small of the traffickers prosecuted compared with the numbers of successful convicts. We had a meeting after our plenary, at which we, okay, 2 seconds, at which we have drafted our recommendations. These are freely available here. We then had a meeting with Ban Ki-moon, who was kind enough to come and seemed rather sympathetic to our cause. We now have this meeting, and, oh, have you switched off my, could I just have it back for 1 minute? And then I will, no? I can't have it back for 1 minute? Okay. Now we have this meeting, and very last words, what are we aiming for? We are aiming to get the UN as it redesignates the Sustainable Development Goals for the next 15 years, and it will be doing so next week. And we have a revision which comes out of our plenary, that what we seek is national resettlement of trafficked persons rather than automatic repatriation. And resettlement is where you come in and are crucial in this, because it takes a lot of effort. It involves many things that I don't have time to go into, and it is not cost-free. We cannot conceal this, but the aim is to turn trafficked people not into forced laborers or forced prostitutes or forced organ givers, but to make them integrated members of our world society who are making a contribution to the country in which they live and realizing, regaining their own dignity, human dignity in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President.